Hey, what's going on? This is your boy E. Jones. You watching From the Bottom to the Top.
Bottom to the Top Hoops, what we like to do is we like to basically put you on to what's going on. Creating highlight reels, what we are setting the platform up for. Kids that are not on the radar, where we can give them a look and get them a look. All right? And log on to that bottomtothetop.hoops.com.
Hey, here with Hall of Famer, Tom Konchalski. How you doing, man?
For an old man, I'm okay.
Good. It's been obviously well documented, your HSBI report and what you've done over your history as a scout. Just want to talk a little bit about, the origin of that and when you started and kind of the progression of that illustration.
Howie Garfinkel started HSBI Report in 1964. It grew out of a magazine he published the previous year, High School Basketball Illustrated, covering New York City, Nassau County, Westchester, Rockland, and North Jersey.
Okay.
High school basketball. And that's coached by the name of Gary Brandenburg from the Citadel gave him the idea to turn that into a scouting service, which he did. It was the second oldest scouting service in the United States. The oldest was Dave Bones out of Toledo, Ohio, Cade School, 1957. But Howie started in 64. With him part-time when I was still a teacher in 77. He had gone to
a teacher?
Yes.
Where did you teach?
I taught in Catholic elementary schools in Queens.
Okay.
And, that was in my misspent youth. People ask me why did I give up teaching, and I always say because the worst game I ever saw was better than the best class I ever taught.
Okay, how many years did you teach?
About 10 years.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
But in any event, I started working with him when he had gone to a telephone service, and then in 1980 I talked him into going back to the written service where he brought me in as a partner. And then in 1984 he sold me the service. So I've been doing it by myself since 1984, 35 years. The reason he sold it is because the NCAA had passed a rule. He was one of the co-founders and partners with the five-star basketball camp. There were Division I coaches working there, and they passed. The schools that didn't have Division I coaches working thought it gave them an unfair recruiting edge, because five-star was huge back then.
Well, it's been well documented that what Five Star has done and how many players they've discovered, and as you speak to that, I'd be interested to know, in doing the service and doing Five Star, do you feel like the platform for Five Star elevated the service, or was it vice versa?
It was a symbiotic relationship where they fed off each other. Okay. And in any event, they passed a rule saying that college coaches, Division I coaches, couldn't work at a camp instituted, sponsored, or operated some with the scouting service. So he sold it to me. Okay. And I've been doing it by myself ever since. He was a great mentor to me, and unfortunately he passed away in May of 2016, 2.5 years ago.
So now, as being a scout and recruiting players, being a New York City guy, you've seen some of the best talent in the city. What would you say the current state of New York City basketball is with representation, with respect to where basketball is in the high school level across the country?
Well, I'd say, first of all, New York City basketball, high school basketball, is somewhat in decline. Okay. It's not as dire a situation as some people paint. Okay. Because you have, if Precious Ochoa had stayed at Our Savior Lutheran, rather than going first to St. Benedict's and now to Montverde. Yep. If Cole Anthony had stayed at Malloy, if Kofi Cockburn had stayed at Christ the King, and if Chris Ledman had stayed at St. Peter's instead of going to Northfield Mount Hermon, I think you have 4 guys there who were elite players. Not to mention Jalen LeCue. Well, he's but Jalen LeCue is a 5th-year guy now. But he would have been in the class, and you have so many other guys like that. What I think it really underscores is that kids aren't proud to play New York City basketball the way they once were, and that's unfortunate. They'll mouth the words that New York City is the mecca of basketball. Yes. in their heart, I don't think they believe it, because they wouldn't not only go to these prep schools or to the knapsack schools in New England, they wouldn't cross the Hudson and go to the Patrick School or to the St. Benedict's or to the, when St. Anthony's was open, to those schools. No, they had some terrific coaches.
Of course.
But they wouldn't leave an elite program, especially in the Catholic League, the way kids have recently.
Let me tell you something, Tom. It's interesting that you say that, because obviously being a guy who played at St. Raymond's, I remember they were calling us the Little East. We're talking 1990, 1989. So Jamal Mashburn, Adrian Autry, Brian Reese,
Derek Phelps.
Yeah, Derek Phelps, Khalid Reeves.
Robert Phelps.
Yeah, the list goes on. Yeah. Jamal Faulkner, Malik Sealy. So all of these guys were in one league at one time. You're talking about 3 top 25 teams. You're talking about 4 or 5 McDonald's All-Americans per year.
Every year.
So to watch that, obviously, as a student athlete trying to play high school basketball, I was drawn to St. Raymond's because it was on the upswing. Gary DeCesar was a young coach. I knew that it had a chance to be good, and I wanted to be a part of that. So with that being said, where did it turn? When did it kind of shift where, obviously the Brooklyn AA is still competitive, but when did the PSAL and the CHSA not be kind of a place where kids wanted to be and sought to compete at?
I mean, the role back then in the glory days.
Okay.
The role of Riverside Church. At one time, Riverside Church sponsored 48 kids in Catholic high schools. And these were minority kids who probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to go to those Catholic schools before.
And the New York City Gauchos as well.
Yeah, not as many.
Okay.
But
I was one.
But some. But some.
Okay.
But 48 kids. And and plus the Wall Street sponsorship program, which was some of the schools that were involved with it are no longer involved with it.
Okay.
It enabled minority kids to go to the Catholic League. The Catholic League was clearly the best high school league in the country back then.
Agreed.
It's not, nowadays it isn't. I mean, it's still a terrific league, and it has a high level of coaching, although you don't have the guys, the Jack Kearns who've coached 55 years, the Tim Learys who coached 44, the Tom Murrays who coached 40, the Jim Gatto's 39 years. You don't have people who've been that long, but still, it's a good league because it has standards and it has eligibility requirements, which I think are important. Even right now, probably the best league in the country is the WCAC Washington Catholic League.
Okay.
It's only 10 schools that play boys basketball, but the top of it, the DeMathis, the Gonzagas, the O'Connells, the St. John's, the Paul VI, those 5 are in the national rankings on a regular basis. Yeah. And we have about some others, like in Chicago, what was the Red West or the Red South League. Now they're combined as Central West Central South and Red, maybe North or whatever. But they were the elite leagues. But the New York City Catholic League was really special.
Right.
And you had people there. Now, I don't know if you're going to see people coach for 40 or 50 years any longer.
Right.
But, like, for instance, in the Archdiocese, the guy who was the greatest tenure and the longest seniority is Tom Freyer at the Mount, and this is his 26th year.
Good friends with Tom. Good friends with Tom.
In the Brooklyn Queens Catholic League, the guy is Joe Abatello. This is 11th year. But it used to be where you had the guy 40 or 50 years.
So now, I'm a solutions guy. I like to figure out, what the issue is, what the concern is, what the problem is, and let's figure out how to fix it. So I think that basketball is a little spread out in New York City in terms of AAU. It's a bunch of programs. So some of the things that I was talking about and I've talked to people about on the show is, how do you coach the coaches? How do you create coaching clinics where you get the young PSAL and high school coaches from the CHSAA and have them learn the game and the history of the CHSAA and the history of the game. So as I'm an aspiring coach or player or parent, get them back infused into the culture and the rich tradition of New York City basketball. So do you think that creating platforms like that would be helpful?
Most of the coaches in the Catholic League are, they understand the tradition of the league.
Okay.
And I think the level of coaching is good.
Okay.
I mean, you have now you lose some elite players, and New York City isn't producing as many elite players as it wants to.
That's just a fact.
I mean, it does produce elite players. Now, a lot of that is the rest of the country is catching up. And one area where basketball really wasn't played so much was the South. And many of the best athletes in the country are African American kids from the South. In the past, they would focus on maybe football or baseball. And now they're attracted to basketball. For one thing, because schools are integrated. When I was growing up, the ACC and the SEC were just integrating in the late 60s. And they had all white teams back then. And this sort of shut out the great African American athlete in the South. And that's opened up. And so many of even Florida, which was traditionally a football state, now they're developing terrific players. And they have major programs, not only the Montforts that attract players from all over the country, and not only the IMG academies that attract kids from all over the country, but the local high schools. And I think the caliber of coaching is improving down there. So, I don't really think New York has lost a step. I don't think it's lost 4 steps the way a lot of people think.
Just talking about the players from the South, and the one thing that I with actually seeing players from the South is there's a natural athleticism that comes with players from the South. And you see New York City, we're synonymous for being good ball handlers, guys who can get to the rim, playing with a grit and a toughness. Now when you see skill set, and now playing hard is a skill, which that was kind of a common thing. How is the game changing where the New York City player has to kind of adapt to what college coaches are looking for? Because at the end of the day, it's all about recruitment and trying to get kids to the next level.
There's got to be a balance. There's got to be a balance between what's known as AAU, but just outside competition, we called it when I was in high school outside ball. I mean, we didn't. The AAU
outside ball, okay.
The AAU was not involved in basketball then. AAU, I remember the first I ever heard of the AAU was the jurisdictional disputes in the 1950s between the AAU and the NCAA in terms of controlling track and field. And the first national AAU tournament in boys basketball was actually organized by Howie Evans of Riverside Church, and was played in 1975 in Cincinnati. It was a 1700 tournament, and there were 8 teams, and Riverside Church won it. But before that, there were no AAU and high school basketball were 2 separate entities. But what you need is a balance between the level of good competition, playing outside ball or AAU, and working purposefully on your skills. And I think the pendulum has swung too much in the direction of playing games at the expense of working purposefully on your skills. I think you need a balance. Now, you can't just do one without the other, because you need that. You need to be tested. And you need to, what you've learned, to try out and be able to adapt it to game situations. And that certainly helps. Playing a lot of games helps especially certain positions, the point guard, because a point guard growing up in New York, playing 9 million games, has faced every possible scenario. And he's prepared for everything. But in general, I think you've got to restore a balance between good competition, which is provided outside of the high school season by AAU and outside ball, and working purposely on your skills. I think you need a balance.
Okay, that's. I mean, I think that's very, very telling. The one thing I wanted to ask also, as you speak about training, I feel like the fundamentals of the game starts with a base of the basic skills, being able to dribble the ball, shoot the ball, play defense, and things like that. And when I watch videos and I look at trainers, there's dynamic things that are happening, but I see a bunch of things that are happening that don't translate to a basketball game. And I don't know if you've ever watched any of what's happening now in terms of training, but it seems like the more tricks you can put into training, the more Instagram views you can get, the more people are attracted to the cachet of it instead of the substance.
First of all, I haven't really watched a lot of the elite trainers working, so I can't say that. I have seen some people, and I think there is too much of an emphasis on tricks, and the, you know what that is? That's allure. that's the carrot to lure the kids to work with them, because that's what they want to put on their Facebook or their whatever.
Social media, yes.
Yeah, they want to do that. But you need people who really work with training, not only in terms of conditioning and improving people physically, and that's a big element now also, but you need people who work on skills.
The basic skill sets that you're looking for, and more importantly, college coaches are looking for when they're recruiting a student athlete to potentially offer a scholarship opportunity, just so we can educate people and kids who are watching the show, and parents who may be misinformed or just, are looking for information to find out, what should my kid be doing?
Well, first of all, you can this makes it sounds like a mathematical equation, which it's not.
Okay.
There are three variables in the basketball equation. Number one is pure physical ability: how big, how strong, how tall, how fast, how quick, how high someone can jump. The second is skills with the basketball: how someone dribbles, passes, shoots, executes the fundamentals of rebounding and defense. And the third is the intangibles, of head and heart, the things you can't put your hand on. How tough, how resourceful, how aggressive, how instinctive players are.
Okay.
Now, obviously, when you look at a player, depending on what position, if it's a guard is going to need more intangibles than obviously a power forward. A power forward is going to need more physical presence than let's say a wing player. A wing player, whether he's a 2 or 3, probably has got to be able to shoot and score the ball.
Okay.
And be able to make plays with the dribble. And so it's a balance. It depends on the size of the young man. And but in general, you want to work on all three of those elements. You want to make it's really important that kids get in the best possible shape they possibly can.
Okay, that's first.
Whether they're 7 feet tall or 5'8", and be in the best condition they can be in, because fatigue is the thief of all skills. And that's number one, the physical element, and you got to work on your skills no matter what position you play. And there are certain skills that are more central to certain positions than to others, whatever. But generally work on your skills. And thirdly, you've got to learn the game and learn to understand the game. And you don't do that just by watching a workout video. You watch a lot of games. People who are true students of the game, and some kids do this, you watch game films. Not just of the pros, because the pros all play the same way. They just high screen and roll. That's the entire game. There's no diversity in offense in the pros.
Right.
Watch college games and watch the way different teams play and the way different players play. Watch high school games to learn from the other mistakes so you don't duplicate those mistakes.
So I've just learned why I wasn't a Division I player. The only thing I had was head and heart, right? But I think that's a great education for kids to understand kind of what to work on and why they should be working on. So I think it's very important that you can teach, but a kid needs to know why. They need to know, if I'm going to work on these things, why should I be doing it, and what does it translate to? So we like to have a little fun on the show, Tom. I think I know the answer, but the best player you've ever seen in high school?
Ferdinand Lewis Alcindor, who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Not even close. I didn't see Wilt in high school. 19. So let me ask you this. Power Memorial, he's playing in high school. What did it look like watching Kareem? This is like man amongst boys, just dominant? He was a force of nature. And when he came into Power, he wasn't good. He was 6'11" as a freshman. He probably played 10 or 12 minutes a game, mainly because there would be a center jump.
On varsity?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he wasn't good at all. His big jump was between his freshman and sophomore year. And he came back his freshman year. LaSalle won the city championship, and they had a 6'9" center, Val Reed, who was a Parade Magazine All-American as a senior. He went to Syracuse. He totally dominated Alcindor. Now, the first game they played of his sophomore year was a Friday night at the Garden. At the old Garden. It was a prelim to the Knicks Golden State Warrior game.
Okay.
And he totally turned. It was November 16th, 1960. He turned the tables on Val Reed, and he never looked back.
Wow.
And that was, Wilt played in the game afterwards, and that's the first time they met in the locker room in between games. Wilt went out and scored 73 against the Knicks.
Wow. So, most exciting player you've seen in high school?
Well, I thought Kenny Anderson was really exciting as a guard. I think he's the best guard I ever saw in high school. Anywhere better than Calvin Murphy, Isaiah Thomas, any of those guys. The only first-team All-City player for 4 years in the New York Post. The only one. Alcindor was 3 years. Dean Memmish was 3 years. Some other guys were 3 years. He's the only first-team All-City player.
Wow.
And he dominated games from the moment. Never started a game as a freshman. Jack Curran would bring him in at the end of the first quarter for a guy by the name of Greg Tracy, who was a Division III player, because he didn't think it would be healthy for him. It was the first and one of only 2 freshmen in his 55 years that he had had on the varsity. And he still was the MVP of the city tournament and first team All-City. He was exciting. Felipe was tremendously exciting, not only because of his athleticism, because of the whole Latino dynamic of the city. And he represented the new wave of immigrants. Now Jonathan Hock is making a 30-30 documentary.
I've heard.
It's going to come out. I think it's going to be ready for April.
So I played together on the New York City Gauchos, and I'm actually a teammate with Arnold Bernard now. So the 87 championship, I believe it was, right? Kenny Anderson versus Arnold Bernard. You were at that game?
No.
Okay.
I went the night before. Listen to the story.
Okay.
The night before, Malloy played in the semifinals against Shenendehowa.
Okay.
And they had a kid, Greg Kubek, who was a McDonald's All-American that year. It was co-MVP of the Capital Classic with Larry Johnson. Malloy played them at Glens Falls. Seats 6,000 people. 5,700 of the people were from Glens Falls.
Wow.
And Malloy beat them. Everyone thought that was the final. The game after that, Springfield Gardens, PSAL champ, played against Our Savior Lutheran. And Jack Curran had the kids stay and watch the first quarter, and then he took them out. They went out to eat and whatever. And they thought that they really had played the final. And they didn't realize that Jonathan Duck and Dwayne Ivory and
Walter
Arnold
Hurd
Bernard and with those guys were waiting for them. And they surprised him and beat him in the finals. So I went home. I went up.
You thought that it was over, right?
Yeah, I went up for the semis. And George Booker was a very good friend of mine.
Yes, God bless him.
But I thought Malloy had won the state championship.
With that game prior.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about coaches. Who was one of the coaches that you admired the most in New York City in terms of how they ran their programs, the type of people they produced? Who was, and I'm pretty sure a lot of these guys were your friends, but who was somebody you admired the way they did things?
Well, a lot of, really two main, and I don't want to name just some and eliminate the others, but there were a lot of them. Jack Curran, whom I knew since I was in the 1960, and I was very close with him, and he obviously was a great mentor of mine. I had a great deal of admiration for him. In the Catholic League, there were a lot of them. Jim Gatta, who coached 39 years at Monte Cristi and St. John's Prep. Tom Murray was very good. But I mean, there were so many good coaches in the Public League, Bobby Hartstein, someone like that. You know, obviously in Jersey, Bob Hurley and Ben Candelino from Elizabeth, and you know, but there are so many great coaches that no one knows about, and there's so many guys who are coaching high school who could coach at the high level of Division I.
So Tom, just in closing, what would you like people to know about Tom Konchalski in terms of you scouting kids, the purpose that you had and love for the game? What would you like people to know and your legacy to be in terms of what you've done in your great body of work?
Learned more from and benefited more from the kids I've met in the game than they've benefited from knowing me, believe me. And I love basketball people. I think they're God's chosen, and the coaches and the players and whatever. And so many kids get bad raps, and and kids have changed somewhat just because the world has changed so much. But generally, kids who play, and I'd say this, from when I first started watching high school basketball in the late 50s, and then especially like in the late 60s and early 70s, I think the average basketball player in New York City is a better person. Average high school kid is a better kid now than then. Back then you had some kids who were rough kids, who were street kids. Now the street kids don't bother with basketball because they can make money at a very young age, unfortunately, doing the wrong things, and unfortunately have some sort of reputation in their community. They don't need the discipline of going on and working on the game and becoming a good basketball player. So I think generally the high school basketball player in New York City is a better kid now than he was 45, 50 years ago.
That's interesting. So I'm just going to say this. In my time of knowing you, the one thing that I will say is that every time that I've seen you, you've always been a gentleman, always a firm handshake, a kind word. You've always asked about myself and my family, so I appreciate you for what you've done for the game and the friend that you've been to me. So thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes, sir.
And give your father and my brother my best.
Yes, will do. Will do.
My name is Tom Konchalski, and you're watching From the Bottom to the Top Hoops.
Any feedback, any kids you feel we missed that we should cover, hit me up, email me at oneblackElvis@gmail.com. We're willing to listen.